Hello, all, and welcome to Are You Hooked?, where we discuss how a TV show captivates an audience. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And we are fascinated by what draws people into a story and want to understand the pieces that get us hooked on a TV show. Today, we'll be discussing the opening scene of The Last of Us, Season 1, Episode 1. Sarah, what scene specifically and what happens in this opening scene?
In this opening scene, we are transported back to 1968, where a group of men are discussing on a TV set, honestly, the things that they're worried about. And one of them is worried about fungus, and it strikes fear into the heart of us all.
So if you want to watch this scene and be refreshed, or if you maybe haven't seen the scene before, we have included in the show notes the timestamps specifically of how we're scoping this opening scene. Basically is the start of the episode all the way up until the opening credits as they unfold. So Sarah, let's dive right in. I'm curious to know, based on this opening scene of The Last of Us, for the show all up, are you hooked after watching this scene?
Yeah, I was hooked. There's so much in this opening scene that I really loved, and I think it's really brilliantly written. And I think one of the reasons why it worked so well for me is just because of how it's written and the quick, witty banter between primarily the fungus doctor and the television host or the show host, and that quick banter and that quick back and forth. And this throughout this scene, there are these moments where they'll have an exchange that's quippy, and then we'll go back to the expert and he will paint this really terrifying picture, and then we'll have some quips, and then we'll go back to just him. And I think the pacing and the structure of that just made me really interested and just interested in the subject matter because of the way that was all structured. So it worked really well for me. What about you, Jen? Based on this opening scene, are you hooked?
Yeah, I was very hooked. I remember being surprised at this opening scene. You know, the 1968 number flashes on screen and you're like, oh, okay, we're going back in time. Yeah, I would have expected when I started watching the show, knowing it was about, Pedro Pascal's in it, and all these faces that are in the show already, and you expect to see those and to follow them as you get acquainted. But this was such a fun surprise and kind of a diversion of my expectations. I did remember finding that the screenwriting and all those clever, witty dialogue built a lot of trust for me with the show. I was like, okay, they know what they're doing. They can write really great dialogue. But then also the way that fungus doctor expert outlines essentially the rules of the world and the rules of the fungus zombies to come, I thought was really efficient as well. So that's really cool too, is just seeing how they could use a really great flashback moment, some really fun dialogue to build trust with us as the viewers, and then kind of explain the rules of the universe that we're about to enter into as we jump forward in the present. I thought was really smart and efficient. There's some really great cuts and shots of the crowd, and then also close-ups and specifically of the host, where you see those glimmers of fear and doubt and foreboding washing upon some of their faces. And I thought that was really smart too. It's like, yeah, you too as a viewer should be scared as well.
Yeah. There's one part in it where the expert, he says, what if, for instance, the world were to get slightly warmer because the fungus can't infect people, blah, 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 science. And I love that he asks that question because we are watching this show in the 2020s, and we already know, because of the world that we're living in, that the world is warmer than it was in 1968. And so I love that the show understands what we as the audience are bringing to this viewing experience. And so we already know the world is warmer. So we already know that this is even more plausible in our time than it was back then. And it's such a brilliant way to set up what we will see over the course of the show, but also as a way to make what he's saying not just seem like this like fringe wild theory that could never happen, but making everything he's saying even more terrifying, which makes me want to lean in and listen more to, like you said, better understand the rules of this world and what we're about to inhabit for the next however many episodes.
And then obviously he ends his whole spiel with, "We lose." And then
Yeah.
there's a hard cut to the credits. So you're like, well, that's foreboding. And how badly do we lose? We got to go find out, you know? And so I think that was really effective. And I think, what's interesting too is that even just the way that that fungus expert kind of takes us on a little emotional journey and ride over the course of his explanation is really effective as well. He's not just droning on about the details and the facts in a just a flat list way, but he kind of takes us on a whole journey to paint this hypothetical picture of what could be too. So there's a close up of his face and it's really dramatic. He's like, what if the world were to get slightly warmer though? And so I thought the way that he did an entertaining job of taking us on a little mini emotional journey. Great TV spectacle making for the audience for 1968, but also, very great little journey that we get to go on as a viewer of the show in general. So I thought that was really fascinating. And then the other aspect is there's this cognitive tension where as he's describing this, and we know that this is in the 60s and we're going to cut to the present soon, and we know this show is about the zombies and whatnot. So like there's a cognitive tension where we know what happens later. We know that he's actually right and that he was correct and everything he's saying has come true. And so we're kind of like anticipating that. So it builds kind of excitement and anticipation for seeing what happens because we know what's about to come very soon.
Yes, and I love that he, even though his theory seems a little out there, even to the other scientist that is there, and he challenges him a little bit, but it's all given this air of credibility. There's nobody kind of like laughing at him or mocking him. He's not like a crackpot scientist or a fringe thinker. There is some weight there, and even the other scientist is listening. And when he gives his rebuttal, then the fungus expert, I just looked it up. What is his name? Dr. Newman is his name, has a very plausible rebuttal. And you can just see, I think those audience shots are so important because you see not only the other scientist and the host are locked in, but the audience is locked in too. And there is this, like, everybody on the edge of their seat kind of posture from everybody else in the room. And I think that also helps us as the audience to have that same type of posture as well, just because of the atmosphere that is created in that scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see that the host almost doesn't know what to do either, as fear is striking in his heart. At the beginning of the scene, we get to see how he's lighthearted and he's joking and he's offering all these fun, spritzy comments, right? But by the end of this scene, his countenance has changed. After the fungus doctor expert says we lose, it's kind of awkward, and we cut to a wide shot and the host says, "Oh, okay, well, let's go to a break." Like he doesn't know what to do with himself. There's all this fear that is rising within him, and it makes for a really awkward moment. So the reality of what's been said and the true understanding that this is very plausible and seems to make some sense seems to be hanging in the air in this scene, and I think that's really effective too. So it's not like we get the host that's just still bumbling along and not believing and not buying into any of it. Like, no, he's kind of bought into this too. Like, this could really happen.
And I love that the way that Dr. Newman describes it. Obviously, like you said, it's very made for TV, and he's a great storyteller. So just shout out to the screenplay and the writers of this episode, because they take us on such an incredible journey in 3.5 minutes, I think this clip is. And Dr. Newman is so level-headed the entire time. And so he's
Mm.
saying like very kind of scary things like some fungi seek not to kill but to control. And then kind of towards the end, he talks about billions of puppets with poisoned minds, which like that's a bar. That's so good. And so there are these really scary things, but he's delivering it so calmly that I think that also helps to give it this air of credibility too, where you're like, oh no, this is utterly terrifying. And then obviously we know what the show is about, so we're going to see the after effects of his prediction coming true. But I think his calmness really helps to make this scene as effective as it is.
Yeah, because there's a willingness for us to believe him, I think, because he's communicating it with such stable countenance versus this kind of hysterical warning that maybe would have been rejected a little bit more by the audience, by someone who maybe seemed like they weren't of sound mind or maybe swept up in the emotions of panic, and making like a dramatic show of it all. And so, yeah, that definitely adds a lot to this as well. One of the other interesting dimensions of this is I think the way that the shots are constructed. So I really love how we get a bunch of back and forth, wider shots of Dr. Newman and the host as they're going back and forth. But there's when Dr. Newman says, "What if the world were to get slightly warmer?" He's basically taking us on this kind of left turn of like, okay, so we've already been talking about how like this probably isn't possible because our body temperatures are too warm for this fungus to survive. But what if? And it's at that moment where it feels like the conversation has taken a turn that we get a much, much closer shot of his face. I think his face fills nearly the entire frame. And we also get a much closer shot of the host's face as he's listening to this and reacting. We get to stare deeply into his eyes as he's emoting so much with them. So I thought that just the cinematography choice to change the shot over shots that we were getting between the two of them to be much closer to both of their faces as the conversation's taking a different tone was a really great like visual mirroring.
Another quick thing that I also loved is that after he says the line, billions of puppets with poisoned minds, then the camera pans over the audience and they're all just kind of staring emotionless at what's happening on the set. And so I thought that was also a really interesting pairing of the dialogue and the visuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Ah, there's so much detail in the scene that I'm so glad we're getting to talk about because I feel like the first time you watch this, you're just here for the ride, here to be entertained, but seeing all of the technical aspects that made this scene so great and so gripping is really fun to see kind of the ingredients that make the larger whole.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so incredible. It's such a great way to start this and so efficient. We learned so much. We've already talked about it. We learned the rules. We learned kind of the tone. We developed trust with the show. And then we are dumped right into Joel's story.
Yeah. So good. So good. One thing that I wanted to mention as well that I think is an added dimension to this scene is that obviously this came out, I think, in 2023, and the whole world had lived through a like actual global pandemic. And so everything he's saying, even just hearing the word pandemic spoken, I think it's just adds so much more extra emotional stakes that I don't know when this was filmed and maybe it was before or after. I don't know. And I know this is based on a video game as well, but just the extra little oomph that the real world events have added to the extra ways that this scene feels dramatic and gripping was notable for me as well, watching this the first time around for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Living through a pandemic and then watching a show that is about a fungal outbreak is it's a lot. Yeah, and this opening scene just kind of drops us right into it and says, "Okay, you got to get ready. We're going into this world. Buckle up.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, this was our discussion of The Last of Us opening scene. So you can find it available to stream on Max. Thank you for listening to this episode of Are You Hooked, where we discuss how a TV show captivates an audience. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about this opening scene. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at TVNSPod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back soon to discuss the final closing scene of The Last of Us Episode 1. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.